Today, medical professionals broadly agree that staring into the dark at a smartphone screen severely damages an adolescent's ability to sleep. For years, researchers have isolated the cause to physical biology. A glowing screen emits blue light that suppresses melatonin and triggers high cognitive arousal, tricking the brain into thinking it is daytime. But clinical psychiatrists are identifying a different variable in the data. The core problem is the behavioral failure the light encourages: bedtime procrastination. Bedtime procrastination is the active failure to transition to sleep at the intended time, despite the absence of external constraints or obligations preventing it. This presents a strict diagnostic split. Is the device physically destroying adolescent sleep through circadian disruption, or is the adolescent actively choosing to delay rest because the device is simply too psychologically rewarding to put down? If the behavioral urge to stay awake drives the sleep loss, prescribing blue light filters or adjusting screen brightness will fail to solve the actual pathology. A 2024 study by Bozkurt and colleagues examined this exact dynamic using 245 Turkish adolescents. These researchers deliberately gathered their data in the wake of the global pandemic. Extended school closures and social isolation forced young people to rely almost entirely on digital interfaces for both education and peer interaction, deeply entrenching screen dependency. The team specifically measured problematic smartphone use, or PSU. PSU is a recognized clinical pattern characterized by severe anxiety when separated from the device, coupled with a consistent neglect of daily responsibilities in favor of screen time. The researchers applied a mediation analysis to the data to isolate the exact cause of sleep loss. Mediation analysis is a statistical technique used to clarify whether an independent variable directly causes a dependent outcome or if it operates through a middle step variable. By structuring the data this way, researchers successfully separated the physiological damage caused by the hardware from the psychological damage caused by the user's choices. The raw baseline numbers from the study reveal a severe clinical reality. Almost half of the surveyed adolescents, 46.9%, already exhibited clinical signs of problematic smartphone use. Across the entire sample, these teenagers averaged 2.8 hours of smartphone usage per day. Digging into the locations of that usage, an overwhelming 93.5% of adolescents reported using their smartphones while physically in bed. This localized usage is extensive. It accounts for an average of 2.3 hours spent on the device while in bed, occurring on nearly 5 days out of every week. This chart shows the specific high dopamine activities consuming this localized screen time. 76.7% of the students used social networks in bed, 68.2% watched videos, and 53.5% engaged in messaging. The physical bed has functionally transitioned from a biological space of rest into a primary locus of high-arousal digital interaction. To measure how this nightly routine degrades physical recovery, the researchers utilized the Adolescent Sleep-Wake Scale. This standardized clinical questionnaire evaluates overall sleep quality based on a patient's ability to fall asleep, consistently maintain sleep, and wake up naturally. This correlation matrix from the study maps exactly which variables do the most damage to that sleep score. Directing our attention to row 6, we measure sleep quality. Tracking across to variable 5, time spent using a smartphone in bed, we see a negative correlation of -0.354. Moving further right to the independent variable, problematic smartphone use, the negative correlation deepens to -0.435. The higher the addiction score, the worse the sleep. But the most severe negative correlation in the matrix is located at variable 8. Bedtime procrastination correlates with sleep quality at a steep -0.628. The preliminary correlation data sends a clear signal. The psychological act of delaying sleep is mathematically more detrimental to rest than simply possessing a high smartphone addiction score. To strictly partition the variance observed in this matrix, the researchers applied structural equation modeling. This mathematical framework estimates a network of causal relationships between multiple variables simultaneously. This model relies on 3 conceptual nodes. Problematic smartphone use acts as the trigger, sleep quality is the final outcome, and bedtime procrastination sits in the middle as the potential mediator. This diagram outlines the total effect pathway. This represents the overall observed impact of smartphone addiction on sleep, calculated without considering any middle steps. The standard beta coefficient here is -0.44. Clinically, this indicates a highly significant overall degradation of sleep. While this total effect proves that smartphones harm sleep, it fails to explain the exact biological or behavioral mechanism of that harm. To find the exact cause, we must calculate the indirect pathway. The first leg of this indirect behavioral pathway outlines how addiction drives procrastination, labeled here as Path A, with a strong beta of 0.44. The psychology driving Path A is entirely predictable. Fatigue lowers an adolescent's self-regulation at night, making it drastically harder to resist an addictive device, thereby guaranteeing that sleep is delayed. The second leg is Path B, linking the procrastination directly to the subsequent sleep degradation. Whether conscious or unconscious, this act of sleep delay violently disrupts the body's natural sleep architecture and its accumulated sleep pressure. Multiplying Path A and Path B, the model calculates the indirect behavioral effect at -0.24. With procrastination stripped away, we see the adjusted direct effect of the smartphone on sleep. That direct physiological path sits lower, at -0.20. Comparing the finalized vectors reveals the structural cause of the sleep deficit. The indirect behavioral path causes a -0.24 impact, while the direct physiological path causes a -0.20 impact. The behavior of procrastinating accounts for more than half of the total sleep disruption. The active psychological choice to delay sleep overpowers the direct physiological impact of the screen itself. This mathematical proof stands in direct contrast to the standard sleep hygiene advice dispensed by clinicians. Traditional interventions rely primarily on hardware restriction. Parents are routinely advised to confiscate devices at night to prevent screen-based melatonin suppression. But for adolescents exhibiting signs of problematic smartphone use, these device-centric interventions reliably fail. Ignoring the deficit in self-regulation leaves the urge to procrastinate intact, driving the adolescent to find alternative ways to delay sleep, or triggering extreme anxiety. Removing the screen without addressing the psychological urge to avoid the sleep transition leaves the adolescent highly vulnerable to chronic insomnia or an immediate relapse into phone usage. Translating the mediation model's findings provides a redesigned standard of clinical care. Interventions must specifically target bedtime procrastination as the primary pathology, rather than treating screen time as the sole enemy. Clinical approaches need to employ cognitive behavioral strategies aimed directly at repairing an adolescent's nighttime self-regulation and impulse control. This requires establishing structured, low-arousal pre-sleep routines that avoid forcing the adolescent to rely entirely on depleted willpower to put the device down. Problematic smartphone use does not operate in a vacuum. It acts as a powerful catalyst for the specific, destructive behavior of sleep delay. To successfully rescue adolescent sleep quality, clinical focus must pivot away from merely policing the hardware and focus entirely on repairing the behavioral transition to rest.